Now Farad tries to give him some breathing room, and he's going to take a shot deep downfield, and open is Bernard Berrien, and the former Bear will go 99 yards for a touchdown.
Manning on 3rd and 10. He fires, and the catch is made by Cruz, who breaks free. One man to beat. Victor Cruz down the sideline. 99 yards from Manning to Cruz.
Wes Welker pulling away, and he ties an NFL record with a 99-yard touchdown. Andre Davis, and Davis will score 99 yards. Wow.
Hello and welcome to 99 Yards, American football for UK fans. I am your host Elizabeth Bhandari, and joining me this week is Duncan Terry, our college football writer George Somerville, and very special guest Neil Dutton from Lyrical. Neil, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
It's going absolutely splendidly. Thank you so much for inviting me. My better half thanks you as well, as it would have meant I'd have to talk to her instead tonight. So she thanks you for this opportunity.
And George, this is your first podcast with us. Are you feeling good?
It is my first podcast, yes. First night nerves, I think, Liz, but I'm feeling pretty good. So, yeah, thanks for having me on.
Good. And Duncan, I can't possibly leave you out. Are you well?
Very well.
Good.
Much better than everyone else by all accounts. All the people dropping out with various ailments.
Yeah, I'm full of a cold at the moment, so apologies to anyone for my sniffles. So, in this week's podcast, we'll be talking about the halfway point in the season. Week 8 is in the books and marks the midway point for most teams. But first, the biggest news of the week, the Cleveland Browns. It's all changed in Cleveland. What do you make of that? Is Greg Williams the right guy, or is he just the next guy?
Personally, I wouldn't let Greg Williams run a bath, let alone an NFL franchise. I think he showed way back in his previous head coaching stint in charge of the Bills, he was hopelessly outmatched. Since then, he's developed something of reputation as, I'll try and be polite, an absolute and utter scumbag, and has no business being in the league. And also as well, what his latest project, certainly that he started in Hard Knocks and he's continued today, is that he's an absolute bullshit artist. Apparently he turned down 7 jobs to come to the Browns. Well, now apparently he turned down 11 head coaching jobs in the last 15 years. So this is the classic, I've been offered all these jobs. You wouldn't know them, though. They all go to different schools. I think, if the Browns want to continue down the path of dysfunction that they've been on for the best part of 20 years, he's the ideal man for the job. Hopefully, though, it's an 8-game fill-in, and then he's tossed aside like so many before him.
Yeah, I agree with Neil. I mean, I think he is just the next guy. He's a stand-in. He's nothing more than that. His record, as Neil points out, at the Bills was not good. He never had a winning record, I think, in the 3 seasons he was there. He then went to the Saints and he had success at the Saints. He won a Super Bowl, but he got caught up in the bounty scandal. In fact, was probably the ringleader in the bounty scandal. Ended up with his suspension. I don't think he covered himself in glory during Hard Knocks, where we got to see anything. The Browns. I mean, we keep on talking about the Browns. It's the way Browns go about things. But since the Haslams took over, I think this is now the 5th head coach they've had since 2012. This is not in any way a way to build a winning team. It's just a disaster. I feel actually quite sorry for Hugh at the end of it all, because I thought after they got through the first 3 games, it looked as if there was an element of light at the end of the tunnel, but clearly not. So I feel for them, but yeah, the Browns are just on a trajectory to nowhere, I'm afraid.
I'd absolutely echo everything you've both said. He's not the answer. He's a stopgap. He was maybe the one with the most experience left in the building outside of a few sort of specialist coaches. He's going to be there to the end of the season, and that'll be that. I think they'll take aim at Lincoln Riley from the Sooners. Obviously, he was Baker Mayfield's coach at college. attacking coaches. They're offensive coaches. They're all the rage at the moment. It's been so successful. So that's probably their aim. But I do fear for Baker Mayfield under Greg Williams. And I don't know if you saw today, we now have to be worried about Nick Chubb as well, because Ryan Lindsay, the former Cardinals quarterback, is now the running backs coach of all things. It's quite how that works. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder where the Browns go from here, to be honest, because they've invested such amount in the team that they've got just now, and they clearly decided to stay with Hugh post end of last season after that pretty horrible season. But I just don't know where they go from here, because I don't think Greg Williams is the answer, and as you say, Duncan, I'm not sure where the next head coach comes from. An interesting name I heard today was Dabo Swinney at Clemson, who has never really distanced himself from a job in the NFL. He's never coached in the NFL, so he's always been seen as the heir apparent to Nick Saban at Alabama, because he came through Alabama as a player and a coach. But I know Lincoln Riley has kind of distanced himself from the role that's currently, but I wonder whether they would go back to college and get someone like Dabo Swinney.
I think the blueprint would seem to be, when we see the successful teams of the last few years, other than the New England Patriots, obviously they're a freak show all by themselves, and they'll continue to do things their own merry way, is if you have a talented offensive coach, you let him basically deal with being the head coach and looking after the offense. Then you find a veteran defensive coach and literally just say, this is your show. All your job, all you have to do is get me the ball back. I will not interfere. You can run it how you want. Obviously, we've got like Sean McVay with Wade Phillips. You've got Doug Peterson with Jim Schwartz. The annoying thing about that is that by that blueprint, then if you had someone like Lincoln Riley to come in, you're thinking, okay, well, we need someone with tons of NFL experience who we could just leave to run the defense. That person sounds like Greg Williams, but as we said, I don't think he's going to be part of any future Brown staff moving forward, even though he would seem on paper to be what they're looking for.
Yeah, who's the next man up? It's a big question, both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's safe to say that there's some interesting times ahead too. Let's focus on the main topic, which is the season ahead. Duncan, I'll start with you. Who makes it to the Super Bowl?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I think Rams Chiefs is the obvious choice, but both lack some playoff experience. Does that matter? In recent times, I think it has done. It's seen many good-looking teams fall by the wayside. So I actually like Saints versus Ravens. If the latter can take the next step. The match they had a couple of weeks ago was just so good. And somehow different to everything else we're watching. Our other writer, Jono, he described it as grown-up football, and he's right. You watch the Rams, who play this fantastic offensive football, but there's a lot of scheme about it. He's taken players like Robert Woods and Jared Goff, who 2 years ago looked like their days were maybe numbered, and now they look like world beaters. So, there's more grown-up football in the Saints and Ravens, I think, and I think that's what the Super Bowl needs.
And Neil, can you see any different teams making the playoffs this year? I guess those that are normally the ones on the outside looking in?
I think it's one of those, as we've reached the halfway point of the season, generally, Bill Parcells always used to say, you are what your record is. And there's a lot of teams now that, there's not many teams where you look at them and think, you're probably a bit hard done by. The obvious exception would be anyone who plays in the NFC East, because it's trash, despite the fact it has the Super Bowl champions in. Washington have shown that they appear to be the most consistent team at the moment, but they've also shown that if you can get them playing from behind and having to trust Alex Smith to make plays, they're not as good. Dallas are Dallas, but as long as you've got a man in Jason Garrett who can clap and clap and clap, you'll be in with a chance of mediocrity. The Giants are, a Greek tragedy. I think when it comes to teams, that we're not used to, the only obvious one I can think of that you look now, but even then, they've been to the playoffs a few times themselves in the last few years, is the Detroit Lions, because the NFC North, bizarrely, is ridiculously wide open. When I think, the Packers are not all they're cracked up to be. The Vikings have shown they're not all, they can have slip-ups. The Bears, again, they don't look defensively the same without Khalil Mack as they do with him. So again, that's a division that's wide open. But in terms of teams that we're not used to seeing, then I don't think so. I think the state of the NFL at the moment is it's very, very hard to make this late season run. I mean, we've seen now that the Houston Texans were 0-3, they're now 5-3. But again, they think and have told us for years that they're a playoff pedigree team. It's just that they weren't doing it on the field. So maybe they could, I don't know, push for a first round bye, but you'd have to see an awful lot of things go wrong for it not to be the Chiefs, probably the first seed. And obviously, because it's the New England Patriots, it's what they do, they'll probably be the second seed. But I don't think there's going to be any fairy tales this season, Liz.
No, I think you make some pretty fair comments there, Neil. George, the race to the bottom is picking up pace, especially after the trade deadline moves. Who do you see picking number one in April?
Oh dear, it really is a race to the bottom, isn't it? As Neil suggested, the blue half of the Meadowlands is not a happy place to be just now, and the Giants are having a truly awful time of it. So I think, to me, the Giants are in free fall now, and I think the trade deadline kind of highlighted that they're now planning for next year. I think alongside them though, because I don't think it's a one horse race. I think the 49ers and the Raiders are going to be there or thereabouts. And in fact, if you asked me this question probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have said the Raiders absolutely were going to be number one pick. And I think they still might be, because if you look at their schedule or the schedule of all three teams, funnily enough, the 49ers have to play both the Giants and the Raiders in the second half of the season. But the Raiders have got the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Ravens and the Chargers all in the second half of the season, which I don't think will be pretty viewing for what's left of the Oakland faithful. So for me, I think it's going to be Raiders first, Giants second, and 49ers third, but who can tell?
I think if that's going to happen, I think we're going to have to see a dramatic second half of the season improvement for the Buffalo Bills, as they are truly one. I've been watching the NFL, I can tell you the exact date. I started watching on November the 19th in the year 2000. This iteration of the Buffalo Bills is one of the worst teams I've ever seen. And bear in mind, in that time, I've seen two teams go 0-16. This is an absolute disgraceful performance from what they're doing on offense. That they had Josh Allen, who I wasn't a big fan of, and then they went, no, we'll go with Nathan Peterman, who's terrible. They go back to Josh Allen, who's not good. So he's injured, so they go back to they go to Peterman. No, we'll get Derek Anderson, who's older than me, so that should tell you that he's probably past the salad days of the NFL. The defense is tragically very good, but unfortunately in the NFL in 2018, you tend to have to score points, and this is a problem they have. And I can't see that getting better. I can't see that situation improving. It's worrying that the NFL, you look how many teams are still competitive, but then you look at how many teams are drifting away down at the bottom with only one win at the halfway mark, as George says. So it's a fascinating group of crap down at the bottom, but it's an awful lot of them. You're thinking you're not getting better with one draft class either.
Tell you what, I'll round out the five as well with the Arizona Cardinals. Rosen may look good, and they may have won at the weekend, but that was thanks to a bum snap over the head of the quarterback. They're not a good team. Josh Rosen, he may look fine. Christian Kirk's a nice target for him. And, it'd be great to see Fitzgerald finish with a fairy tale, but they've really not got very much at all.
No. And it's, again, if you just say it's, yet again, you have a team that is obviously intent on bringing in a young quarterback that needs developing, and you make the wrong decision at offensive coordinator right from the get-go. So obviously they made the change. They fired Mike McCoy. They promoted Byron Leftwich. Who, as I say, Byron Leftwich has gone from a top 10 draft pick to an NFL offensive coordinator in 15 years. That's quite a meteoric rise. But the wrong decision was made at the start of the season. You've lost half of a season of development to someone who, apparently, by all accounts, he may not have the highest ceiling of the early round quarterbacks, but he was the most NFL ready at the time. But straight away you've stunted that growth by putting him in an obsolete offensive system with a clueless offensive coordinator. So this is the lesson, obviously, to the Cleveland Browns, as we say, that they've got to get as much of the head coach right. The man who's going to be working with the quarterback, you've got to get that appointment right as well.
It does just show you, doesn't it, that, you know, we coming out of the draft this year, which was meant to be the strongest quarterback draft possibly ever, certainly for a number of years. And all of these guys, with perhaps the exception of Jackson at Baltimore, have been dropped in at QB1. You're right, Neil. It's such a difficult thing when you don't have that support round about you. You don't have the right offensive coordinator or the right QB coach. That these guys are being left to flounder, and I feel really sorry for Josh Allen at Buffalo. He's in for a torrid time this season, and only time will tell whether he actually survives the end of the season, because his confidence may well be shot to pieces. And coming out of the draft, I actually fancied him because I watched him a lot at Wyoming, and he's got a great arm. But the question was, he had to land, as they all do, at the right team, and I don't think he landed at the right team in Buffalo. So I think he's going to have a tricky time, and whether he's there for a year or two, I'm not so sure.
And swiftly moving from bottom to top, Neil, who have you got for MVP?
At the moment, there's only one winner for me, and that's Patrick Mahomes. I think the knock used to be that, these quarterbacks who've played in the air raid offense in college, you can't come in, you can't build an NFL offense around them because the little gimmicky things they've done in college, it's not going to work. Well, tosh to that, quite frankly. Andy Reid, who was long-standing adherent to the West Coast offense. Andy Reid made a living in Philadelphia of forgetting he had running backs and just passing and passing and passing. But all of a sudden, he seems to have, we thought he'd opened up his playbook last year with what they did with Alex Smith and how well Alex Smith played. Well, if we thought Alex Smith was good last year, he threw 26 touchdown passes. Patrick Mahomes has already thrown 26 touchdown passes. So that shows you, in the same system with pretty much the same players, how that offense has been elevated by the play of Patrick Mahomes. And I think the usual MVP candidates, Aaron Rodgers hasn't looked great. Tom Brady doesn't look right. Carson Wentz has played well, but, still the Eagles' offense is still pretty broken as far as I'm concerned. And Russell Wilson isn't the focal point of his offense. So I think it's Patrick Mahomes, and aside from maybe Jared Goff or Todd Gurley, I don't even think there should be anyone else in the conversation.
So, we've got Neil's verdict. George, Duncan, is there anyone else out there who you feel could come through in the final half of the season?
I think it's. There's clearly there's a potential for people just to rise up and come through. I kind of agree with Neil. There's a front runner just now. I think Todd Gurley's had an exceptional year in Los Angeles, and I think that will continue, particularly if they have a run to the Super Bowl, because I think the Rams, should they get there, would be in with a very good shout of being Super Bowl champions. And of course, the Rams are kind of all in this year, so they've clearly made their intentions quite clear. So I kind of like Todd Gurley. The one thing I would say, I'm going to make your day, Liz, but I was just looking at some stats, and I saw an interesting thing in one of the sites today about Russell Wilson. And in his last 3 games, Russell Wilson has started to really up his game. And in the last 3 games, he's completed 72% of his passes, and his QB passing rating is 140.6. So it strikes me that I think it might not be enough to push him through. But if you were talking about people coming from a pack or further behind the pack, it looks as if good old Russ is upping his game a little bit.
As a Seahawks fan, I've got to say, in Russ we trust.
The Russell Wilson story has been quite amusing, to be honest, amongst the Seattle beat writers, because all off season have been talking about how you need to throw to win these days, and out Pete Carroll comes and they're running the ball to set up the pass, just proving everyone's statistical analysis not relevant, not wrong, but just anything can win it on the day if you do it well. I think a player that no one's mentioned yet, and I hate myself for doing it because it's always a quarterback, isn't it? It's Drew Brees. He's having a great year. He's breaking all sorts of records. He's not doing as much flair as Mahomes. But it's kind of a story this year. And if the Saints make it, if they beat the Rams on Sunday, they're in pole position for the number one seed in the NFC. It's more of a storybook kind of pick, but I'll give you a second. What about whoever runs the cap at the Los Angeles Rams? They're really earning their money.
And keeping this one with you, Duncan, let's look at the rookies. Who have you got for offensive and defensive player of the year? Well,
it's going to be hard for Barkley not to win it because everyone just loves the guy. He's in New York. He's in a terrible situation, but he's still, he's doing the business. But I'd say look out for DJ Moore and Calvin Ridley at wide receiver as well. If they really step on, Moore came in for Torrey Smith this weekend and looked sort of double the player. And Calvin Ridley, he's scoring touchdowns for fun. If it was me, though, I'd give it to Quentin Nelson. I think the improved play of the line, they've obviously got the new centre as well. It's really helping Luck this year, and he's looking a different player. Managed to stay on his feet, but there's never any love for linemen, is there? In defence, it's going to be a straight battle between Denzel Ward and Derwin James. It can only be one of the two of them at the moment, really. However much I'd love it to be Griffin.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that Griffin point. I think he's been pretty incredible to watch so far. So thanks for that, guys. All interesting stuff, and I, for one, can't wait to see what all those players do over the next 9 weeks. So, seeing as we have our college writer here, let's talk about that. George, the first official college rankings came out last night. How does that system work? Were there any surprises?
So, yeah, this was a quite a pivotal week in college. So the college rankings have always, for maybe as long as they've been up and running, been fairly controversial. Have always been based on a kind of polling system, and the predecessor to the current setup was a combination of journalist and coaches polls plus a fairly convoluted and complicated computer-generated system, which just didn't work, and it was always pretty controversial. 4 years ago, they brought in the college playoff system. And essentially, it's a committee-based approach, and the committee is formed of 13 people, and they sit from this week all the way through to the end of the college season. And so what they've been doing in the last since I guess the first few weeks of the season is just building up this old adage, which is body of work. So what they're doing is they're looking at all the teams. Seeing the quality of their schedule, the quality of their wins, and actually, more importantly, the quality of their defeats. Because as if you watched any of the college football, you'll know that there are some teams which are currently unbeaten, and the difficulty there is that they may be playing in a conference which is not as tough as some others, and it's not a really good comparison, but it's a bit like comparing the Premiership with Serie A with La Liga. How do you compare those across the piece? So the committee sits once a week. The committee comes up with a top 25 ranking, and the first ranking was issued last night. And I guess you asked were there any surprises, Liz. We've had we're now well past the midway point in the college season. So I think the Associated Press poll, the coaches polls have been running since week 2. So they're a pretty good barometer of who's likely to be at the top of the rankings. And I guess the most important thing here is while the ranking is 1 to 25, it's really only the top 4 which matter in the grand scheme of things come the end of the season, because the top 4 then move into the college football playoff. 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3 in almost a kind of semi-final type scenario, and then the winners of those 2 games go to the actual college football playoff to play for the national championship. So top 4 were Alabama, Clemson, LSU and Notre Dame. I don't think Alabama and Clemson were a surprise. Both are unbeaten. Notre Dame's unbeaten as well, but not to labour the point, but Notre Dame stick out a little bit on their own, because they're one of the few true independent colleges in the US. So they're not really attached to a conference like the rest of them are. So for want of a better word, the Notre Dame make up their own schedule by invitation, because they're such a big name. People want to play them, so they get to play. So they can effectively manipulate their schedule throughout the season, which is one of the big criticisms of Notre Dame, and why when they tend to be included, they can be a controversial pick. But they're undefeated so far. But the ones in there who are truly on merit are LSU, who have just a fantastic defence and played exceptionally well. Now the big point here is that LSU and Alabama play on Saturday. So one of those teams is going to be beaten. So the interest would then be what would happen to the beaten team, because this is a wholly flexible system. The teams move up and down as the weeks go on. I guess surprises. Houston didn't feature in the top 25. They're a 7-1 record. They're playing exceptionally well. They've got what I think is going to be one of the top picks in the draft, Ed Oliver at defensive tackle, who's just a sensational player, and I think Houston have played some fantastic football this season. And Northwestern haven't made it in either. That's going to be interesting, because Northwestern will play Notre Dame shortly, and I think they'll have a big say on whether Notre Dame end up undefeated for the rest of the season. And I have to say that if Notre Dame get a defeat between now and the end of the season, I suspect they drop out not only the top 4 but probably out of the top 10. So this is a very interesting time, college football. If you've not tuned in on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday night, I would suggest you do, because now is where it gets real, and we're now on the final leg up to December, when we decide the top 4.
Can I ask a question? I haven't even started looking at draft prospects myself yet. I don't tend to do that until much closer to the bowl games. Is what Nick Bosa has done, is that liable to be repeated this year, and is that going to become more of a thing, more prevalent moving forward, or is it unique to his situation?
No, I don't think it is unique. I think there's been some precedent before with this. You're talking about the injury, yeah. So there's been precedent. Jadeveon Clowney did it. It didn't harm his draft prospect. He still went number 1. He actually, in many ways, he was more controversial, because he just said, "I'm not going to play." And listen, we know with the way that Joey Bosa, who's his brother, left Ohio State, and how he then negotiated his way through the Chargers. We know that as a family they're pretty strong-willed, and they know what they want to do. But you are right. What I think is becoming more of a feature are players who are more inclined to look after themselves, knowing fine well that they're the asset that they need to protect going through into the draft. So I think there's probably, history has been littered with this a little bit. There's been a few players who have decided, okay, enough's enough. But I think I was reading a bit today about Rashan Gary at Michigan. Suggestions that he's not playing because he's wanting to take care of his body. I think Harbaugh came out today and said, no, that's not the case. He's nursing what is quite a serious shoulder injury, and his teammates also came out and said, no, that's not the case either. So clearly there are murmurings for individual players. So I think this will always happen because at this point players are being advised by a number of different people, and a lot of these guys, particularly quarterbacks, have come through various different training regimes and schools and academies who are, the college side of it is actually almost a little bit of a byproduct. They are being managed their way through the college system to get to the NFL. So I think you're right. I think there will be more instances of this going forward. As to whether it impacts his draft status, I don't think so. I think he'll be okay. But as I say, I love Oliver, and this will be interesting because if the draft goes the way that and you're right, it is too early to really be talking about these things. We could have a couple of defensive linemen taken 1 and 2 in the draft for the first time in over 40 years.
If I may, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Central Florida. I believe, unless I'm mistaken, they're still undefeated, which has been, I guess, coming on for 2 seasons now. I'd always assumed that they weren't ranked as highly because of strength of schedule. Yeah. But then you've mentioned Notre Dame, which I was unaware of. So why would they be up there, but Central Florida wouldn't be?
Yeah, so I mean, the Central Florida thing is anyone who's even not familiar with college football knows that it was a big thing last year where they went the full season unbeaten, and the college playoff committee talked about the strength of their schedule. I mean, I guess this year it's pretty straightforward, as I think it was last year. But I think as you get closer, 12 and 0 in any sport is pretty impressive, right? So I think as UCF got closer to the end last year, undefeated, there was a groundswell of opinion that were like, okay, listen, this team should be getting close. But this year they're still undefeated. But the interesting thing is they're the only team in the country, in the US, without a victory against a team with a winning record. So every team they've played so far does not have a winning record. So I think that really does shout out towards the strength of the schedule. And as I think I said, right at the outset of this piece, that it's about the quality of schedule, it's the quality of wins, and it's the quality of defeats. Okay, defeats don't count here, but it's the quality of win in this case. And I think you can look at a Notre Dame situation where they've beaten Michigan, and they've beaten some other teams in there who are ranked, and I think that's what goes in their favour. But I think for Notre Dame in particular, their run-in is a little bit fraught with danger. And I think what happens is they play USC on the last day of the season, but I think actually the Northwestern game, which I think is in 2 weeks' time, is the one that probably trips them up. UCF, I was reading some American press today. I think a lot of people think they're too highly ranked at 12. They're not a top 10 team. I think if you stick them in a top 10 and ask them to play against some of the other teams in the top 10, like a Kentucky, for example. I mean, Kentucky have been a fantastic season this year, and actually at one point I think people thought they might get into a playoff situation, but they've had a tricky couple of games. UCF wouldn't stand up against a Kentucky, and that's even before you move up to the Georgias and the Michigans of this world. So, the schedule, it's maybe a bit unfortunate for them. You can only play who you can play, but unfortunately, that's not how the playoff committee look at it. They look at it on the quality of your schedule, and what they often talk about is the body of work. So, UCF unbeaten going towards the end of the season, with maybe Notre Dame and LSU, Michigan losing somewhere in there. I still don't think they make top 4. They might get into the top 6, but we'll see. Famous last words.
That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't realised about their opposition not having a winning record. That's interesting.
Thanks for that, George. And Neil, what have you been up to on your various shows? Did you enjoy seeing Eagles play at London?
I did indeed. So it was a substantial check off the bucket list. The atmosphere was phenomenal. I had the good fortune of sitting close by to a lot of people who were Philadelphia natives, and they said it was as loud as any game they've heard in the Link. It was obviously in keeping with the Eagles fans' reputations that when the Jaguars marching band came on, they were booed. When the Jaguars cheerleaders came on, they were booed. That just seems to be what the Eagles fans do. But it was, I think if we look back, it wasn't a great game. At least it was competitive. But it was an enjoyable experience. It was interesting as well to get through a whole game sober, which I did voluntarily, just to make sure I could take it in and enjoy it. But yeah, as I'm obviously keeping busy, I've got my several weekly articles that I do. I do my weekly statistics, five statistics that I think are interesting from a previous week's standpoint. That comes out for Number Fire. I've got 3 articles a week for Rotoviz. You should all, by the way, go and subscribe to Number Fire and Rotoviz. That'd be lovely. And also, I've been lucky enough this season to be asked to write a monthly article for Yahoo.
Awesome.
Thanks to Matt Kelly from Roto Underworld and PlayerProfiler.com. So that's been fun. That's been good to see, basically to see the work get published in quite a high-profile platform, because Yahoo is obviously one of the big fantasy sites. It's also nice to see the comments that get posted under the articles that, I'll be honest, I've stopped reading because it was the temptation to answer every single one of them, and then I thought, I really don't have the power or the time to argue with these people on Twitter. Most of who, looking at the comments, hadn't even read the article in the first place. But obviously, we're having fun still doing the podcast. That's Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. We've recently, we've been doing it for 6 years now. It was the 6th anniversary a few weeks back.
Wow.
And we're still annoying each other on a weekly basis. Trying to look like we know what we're talking about, but basically just talking very loudly at each other until one of us gets bored. But it's all good. I say it's the season can be a little bit of a grind when you're about this way through. If it feels like you watch the games, you're right. You watch the games, you're right, and it can be a bit of a rut. But then you remember that this is it's only a very short season. It's a very long off season, so we make the most of it and we enjoy it while we can. But it's all great fun.
Good. It's really good to hear, and well done on the Yahoo gig.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, that's all from us at 99 Yards. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.